This video is for IB Math Studies. What I'm doing right now is running through how to use our graphing calculator to calculate means and standard deviations and showing work while doing that. So what I have given here is a data set, and this data set looks kind of similar to the data set we collected in class from maze times. What I'm going to begin by doing is entering this data set into my graphing calculator. Notice here that I'm not worried about frequencies, so I'm not having frequency lists and if a number is appearing more than once, like for example 60, I'm going to type it that many times. So I'm just going to take a minute and type this all in. So there we go, and I'm just going to, I was in the wrong spot when I typed these in, so I'm just going to get rid of them so I don't confuse myself later on. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this place, and I'm going to go and run the one variable statistics on that data set. So I typed that data down 1, the frequencies are all 1, so I can leave the frequency list blank, and then I'm going to hit calculate. So here it stored my, it stored my mean into my calculator. I could write it down, but it's storing it also. And I'm just going to take note and record my standard deviation. And that's the number that I'm going to come up with by hand when I do this. So, when calculating on a test or a quiz, calculating the mean, if I want to show my work, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start, and I'm going to use a little ellipsis, and then write the last answer, divided by, if I counted these up, 1, 2, 3, there's 25 of them. And I'll just write the answer then after I've gotten it from my calculator. So all you're doing here is demonstrating that you understand the formula. Am I actually using the formula to do the computation? No, I'm just going to use the calculator to do it. I'm going to do a similar thing for the standard deviation. And this is going to be really similar to number 6 from the activity. So in number 6 on the activity, we ask to fill in a table like this. Right? So I'm going to do that on my calculator. So I'm going to go and press the stat button and go back here. And now my items in L1 are the xi's. So x1 is 13, x2 is 22, x3 is 25, etc., 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 all the way down to x25 at 511. So this column here is really just the items from column 1 subtracted the mean from it. So I can do that all at once on my calculator rather than doing this for every single value. So I'm going to move my cursor up so it's on the L2 heading, and I'm going to press enter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do L1, because that's where all the xi's are at, minus and then I'm going to type the mean in. I could type the mean in as a decimal, like I have over here, but instead, if I didn't want to write that down or remember it, or it was so many decimal points that it was going to be really annoying to remember and type in, I can have the calculator put it in there for me. So if I press the vars button, vars is short for variables. So the variables I want are the statistics variables. So I'm going to scroll down to statistics. I'm going to press enter. And you'll notice here I have an X bar. That is our symbol for me. So I can press enter and the calculator has completely populated my entire list for me. Oh, that was a lot faster. To fill in this column now, well, that's really just these things squared, right? So I can do a similar thing. I'm going to go over and move my cursor so it's on the L3 heading, and press enter. And then I'm just going to type in L2 squared, because, again, this list is really just the things from L2 and then squaring them. So if I press enter now, it'll populate that whole list out for me. And I did it all in one fell swoop. That's pretty nice. So if I'm asked then to do a standard deviation, I'm going to need the totals from these columns. So all that information is on the calculator. I'm not going to write it in here. But the totals I need to do the formula for standard deviation. So I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to go back to stat, and over to calc, and I'm going to do one variable statistics again. But instead of doing it on L1, I'm going to do it on L2. And I'll show you why in a moment when I run this. So here is our information on L2. Notice that that gives me the sigma x. So sigma x is just the sum of everything in this list. Oh, that's what I would want here anyways. And in general, if you're doing this correctly, that sum should always be 0. And if I look here, the sum of the x, or sum of x squareds, well, that's just the things in this list, right? Which are these things squared. Oh, okay, so I'll just write that number down. I'm going to move my circle out of there. 229,259, yada, yada, yada. And I could write those other decimals down, but I'm going to use the calculator to pull them anyways. So my variance formula is this. So the sigma, again, that stands for sum of the xi squareds. That's just this number right here, right? And n, that was just the total number of things in my data set. There are 25 of those. So this is going to give me my variance. So I could type that in by hand, or what I'm going to do is have the calculator do this for me. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 25 times, and if I go back to vars and down to statistics again, I can pull out that sigma x squared value, where I don't have to write it all the way down, and press enter. And it spits out 91703,936. So there's my variance. And remember the standard deviation, well, that's just the square root of my variance. So to do that in my calculator, I'm just going to press second, square root, and then second, the negative sign, that's the ans command, so it's whatever was the previous answer. And then I'm just going to press enter. And it says my standard deviation is 95.76, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so that should be my answer. Let's check that real quick. So I can check that by pressing, well, I can go back to the beginning, and I wrote it down when we did it the first time, or you could redo that part. Oops. So you see that my standard deviation that I checked in the beginning was the same thing I got here. So in terms of showing my work, what I'm going to write is like 1 over 25, and then I'm going to do like first data point in my data set, which was 13, minus my mean, which I wrote down was 83.92. I'm just going to do this real quick so I have a little more space. Squared plus my second point in my data set, which was 22. Squared, dot, dot, dot. The last value in my data set, that was 511. Oops, 83.92. And then I'm just going to slap a square root on top of all of that. So in terms of showing enough work, that's enough work. And I guess if I wanted to do 3 sig fig, since this is an IB class, I would say 5.8. Oops. And that's how we can use our graphing calculator to find a standard deviation or fill in the table. Like in Activity 6, you might have to do that on your quiz or test. And yeah, so have a nice day.